Good afternoon. It's so wonderful to be back here with you. My name is Cisco Walker, and I'm a struggling evangelist here in Roswell, New Mexico. Alien town, Roswell, New Mexico. If you get a chance, try some abduction beef jerky. It is the best beef jerky right here in Roswell proper. It's a very cool store, some very cool merchandise in there. If you have time, go and look at it. But tonight, we're going to be talking to you. Tonight, I'm going to be talking to you about Roswell and the unhoused, or Roswell and the homeless. Homeless is actually an older term. It's more of an archaic term. Now, unhoused people, we call homeless unhoused or displaced. So tonight, we'll be talking about Roswell and the unhoused. I have a passage of scripture to read to you today. It comes from Luke chapter 10 and verse 36 and 37. This is the story of the Good Samaritan. And Jesus says this: "So which of these three do you think was neighbor to him who fell among thieves? And he said, he who showed mercy on him. Then Jesus said to him, go and do likewise." So tonight we're going to be talking about Roswell and the unhoused. Can I tell you that Roswell is a wonderful little place? But can I tell you something, that Roswell has problems, just like the metropolitan area has problems. And part of the problem, or what people think it is the problem here in Roswell, are the unhoused. But can I tell you tonight that the concept of Mayberry and Andy Taylor and Opie Taylor, that concept is gone. Can I tell you that the days of Ozzie and Harriet, they are over? Can I tell you tonight that Roswell is not a Pure Flix movie set? Roswell is not a Hallmark movie set. You know, I work for the city of Roswell, and part of our rounds include going downtown, and we have a wonderful downtown area here in the city of Roswell. And but you know, people are the people of the city and the businesses, they're trying to make it look like a postcard. They're trying to make it look like a movie set, but and it's very frustrating. But I hear this over and over and over again. What are we going to do about these people? What are we going to do about the homeless? Because the homeless are tearing things up. The homeless are doing this. The homeless are doing that. We don't like it. But can I tell you tonight, city of Roswell, it's time to accept it. We have to accept the fact that we have people here in Roswell who are hurting, and they are on Main Street. And what are we going to do about it? It's time for us to get over it, and it's time for us to actually start doing something about it as well. See, the unhoused aren't going anywhere, and that's my first point tonight, because if we're ever going to turn a corner, if we're ever going to make a difference, if we're ever going to be truly Christian, if we're ever going to live out the parable of the Good Samaritan, too many people are like the priest. They just want to pretend that the problem doesn't exist. But the unhoused are here, and they're not going anywhere. Other people, they're like the Levite. They may look for just a moment or two, but then very quickly they want to pretend that these problems do not exist, and they are like the Levite. But God is calling and raising up people to have the heart of the Good Samaritan, who will stop, who will get involved, and who will get their hands dirty, metaphorically speaking, spiritually speaking, and make a difference in people's lives. Because even though this is a small town, even though this is a rural town, we still have crime. There's crime here. There's prostitution here. There's murders here. There's homicides here. There's ugliness here, just like there is anywhere else. But we have to realize tonight that these problems, they're not going anywhere. They are here to stay. And the unhoused, or the marginalized, or the displaced, they are not problems, but they are people who have been made in the image of God. And therefore, we as Christians, we have an obligation, we have a privilege, we have a responsibility to treat them with the love of God that has been extended to us. Number two, we're talking about Roswell and the unhoused. The second thing we're going to talk about is there are many who want to criminalize the unhoused right here in Roswell, New Mexico. People have this mentality, oh, just lock them up and throw the key away. Many people have this mentality here in the city of Roswell. If it's out of sight, then it's out of mind. I don't really care where the unhoused are. As long as I can't see them, then the problem doesn't exist. But just because you can't see crime, just because you can't see the prostitution, just because you can't see human suffering. See, sometimes we don't like to look at human suffering, and I can completely understand why. But you can't criminalize people and lock people up just because they are homeless. You say, well, what's the definition of criminalization of the homeless? This is when local and state laws, they penalize life-sustaining activities. People who are sleeping can be penalized. People who are sitting can be told to leave. And if they don't leave, they can get a ticket. They can be arrested. People who are camping in public places, they can be arrested if they will not break camp and if they will not move. Now, 5 reasons why criminalizing the homeless is ineffective tonight, and it's ineffective here in the city of Roswell as well, because it increases barriers to housing and to jobs. That's one of the tropes. That's one of the cliches. You know, we're trying to break down stigmas here, talking about the unhoused in Roswell here tonight. Your average person will say, I don't understand why those people can't just go out and get a job. Why can't they just go out and get a job and be like everybody else? Pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. Why can't these people just go out and get a job when in reality they don't even see them as people? They see them as problems. They see people as statistics and numbers and failures and on and on and on. But the reason most people can't go out and get a job when they're unhoused, they don't have an ID, they don't have a mailing address, they don't have, there's a lot of things that you need in order, they don't have an alarm clock, so how are they going to get up in the morning? And people say, well, they've got phones and they don't, well, I understand that there's a lot of people in the city of Roswell, they hate the fact that the unhoused have phones. But you know what? It's time for us to come back to the reality that these problems are here and they're not going anywhere, and we can't arrest our way out of these problems because they simply don't work. The second reason why is it's significantly more expensive for taxpayers to just lock up every homeless person over and over and over again. And another reason it doesn't work is because it disrupts essential support groups. You know, sweeps. There's sweeps. I remember, me and my wife, we labored in Albuquerque for 3 years, and the city would come through with the sweeps. Well, what happens in the sweeps? Well, what happens in the sweeps is it the city comes, or the Parks and Recreation Department comes, whoever's assigned to the task, the code enforcement, usually it's code enforcement actually, to correct myself, but code enforcement comes, and so a person's belongings who is unhoused, marginalized, displaced, they're simply thrown into the trash can, but there's photos that are thrown into the trash can, there's ID, there may be an ID that's thrown into the trash can. There's a social security card that's thrown into the trash can. There's a marriage certificate that's thrown into the trash can. So when it comes time for something else more important to happen, like getting a job, getting an apartment, getting your medication because you have a mental health condition, getting your medication because you suffer from disability, you can't anymore because the ID's in the garbage can, the birth certificate's in the garbage can. All these things happen because of sweeps. All these things happen because of criminalization of the homeless or the unhoused, and we cannot arrest our way out of this situation. The only way that we will get through this situation is to show mercy. The only way that we will get through this situation is to develop the characteristics of the Good Samaritan, to take time, to get involved, to dig deep, and to do the love, to practice the love of God in action. That's the only way that these problems will be rectified. Another reason, it worsens public health. A lot of people, now I want to be fair, it worsens public health and safety, but a lot of people say, let's just get all the homeless people, let's round them all up, let's take them to the outskirts of town, and we'll provide a camp. We'll clear off 100 yards, we'll make a football field, we'll clear off 4 or 5 acres, and we'll let the homeless just live out there, because then we don't have to see them. Then we can have Mayberry, then we can have Main Street, then we can have our community communities, in our neighborhoods, and then they can look like a Norman Rockwell a painting. Then we can have our American dream, and we can have our apple pie, and we can eat it too, because these less desirables, we will just put them over here in a camp, and then they can just do whatever they want to do. If they want to eat each other, then let them eat each other. If they want to beat each other to death with clubs, then let them beat each other to death with clubs. Who really cares? As long as I don't have to see it, as long as I don't have to smell it, as long as it doesn't disrupt my little fantasy land or my little marshmallow world, then let's provide an area for them to just completely run amok, because that's exactly what happens when you have these camps. Because you see, when you have these big areas where you just let the homeless, where you get 100, 200, 20 homeless people, and they're all living, there's a hierarchy that develops, and there's shot callers, and those shot callers go around and they say, oh, okay, you want to live here? Well, you like to do drugs? Well, I like to do drugs too. And if you want to live here, then you give me some of your drugs. And if you don't give me those drugs, then I'm going to get you out of here. Oh, you've got daughters. You've got this. You've got that. Well, you know what? Fork them over. Give them over to us, because if you don't, then you're not going to live here, and you can live outside of the camp. You see, swimming with sharks, it doesn't work. It won't work. Look at the disaster of Coronado Park. It didn't work. There was a hierarchy. There was drugs. There was prostitution. There was homicides. There was sickness and disease because of unsanitary situations. So point being tonight is that we can jail, fines, court costs in the legal system, they are not the answer. We cannot arrest our way out of this problem, and we've got to get used to it, because it is here in Roswell, New Mexico, and it isn't going anywhere. The third thing I have is that you all know that there's an election coming up here in Roswell, and there's Charles Eastloss, and Charles Eastloss is running for sheriff here in New Mexico. And I had an opportunity to talk to him, and I said, my name's so-and-so, and I know that you're running for election. Why should I vote for you? You know, what makes you such a great candidate? What makes you such a good sheriff? And I said, how do you intend to deal with the unhoused? I said, how do you, what are your plans for the homeless? Because, that's important to me, and it ought to be important to you, because you live here. This is your community. You're residents of Roswell. You're raising your kids here. This is a good place, but it's important because we have to know how we're going to attempt to solve these problems. But he went right into criminalization of the homeless. And he said, if I win and if I become sheriff, the thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start locking them up. I'm going to start rounding them up. I'm going to start putting them in the back of police cars. I'm going to pack the jails with people. But criminals, we can't arrest our way out of this problem. And then this is something that he said that I found very interesting. He told me that he's afraid that Roswell, New Mexico is in danger of becoming a little Albuquerque. And I looked at him and I said, sir, I have problems with that, because I labored for 3 years in Albuquerque. And I said, you don't have nearly a fraction of the problems that Albuquerque has. I said, for number one, I said, you don't have fentanyl here. Thank God you don't have fentanyl. Excuse me. I said, you have fentanyl here. I said, but most people who are doing fentanyl, I don't see them on Main Street. I don't see them on street corners. I don't see them slumped over. I don't see them bent in half. Most people that are doing fentanyl, they're doing it with indoors, in secret, in private, not like Albuquerque, mind you. And so I said, I think it's a bit of a stretch of the things that you're saying. And he says, I don't want people to think that I don't give a crap, but at the same time, I don't want them crapping on my sidewalk. Now, I understand those things. These problems are very difficult. And remember that people aren't problems, but there is a problem amongst what are we going to do? How are we going to handle it? How are we going to solve it? And the answer is we're never going to solve it. This takes the love of God. This takes the love of God being shed abroad in my heart and in your heart. But I compared this to Albuquerque, and there's been all these rumors about, and maybe they're true. I've had some strong validations. I've had some what I would call objective evaluations of this, where people have said, people in power, people with authority, people in positions, here in local government, and in city government, in city politics, and they said that they have seen people, they have heard, they've seen people being brought in here, bust in here from Albuquerque. But I had some problems with that, and I began to think about that. And for one thing, if I was a drug addict, I wouldn't want to leave Albuquerque, and I wouldn't want to come to Roswell. Why? Because there's better drugs in Albuquerque. There's fewer drugs here in Roswell. The drugs are cheaper in Albuquerque. They're probably more expensive here in Roswell. In Albuquerque, I can get drugs 24 hours a day. Here in Roswell, I have limited access to the kind of drugs that I can get. More than likely, here in Albuquerque, there's more people. In Roswell, obviously, there's less people. There's more opportunities for theft and crime, and you can get into a whole lot more trouble in Albuquerque than you can in Roswell, and that's why people from Roswell like to go to Albuquerque, but they like to come back very quickly because they see that the city is wrecked, and and all the problems with crime and drugs and their problem with unhoused and marginalized people. So what do we do? If you're in Albuquerque, you've got a relaxed police force. Here in Roswell, the police are they're more aggressive as it concerns some of these things. In Albuquerque, there's more resources. There's better resources. And here in Roswell, there are resources, but you don't have as many places to eat to choose from. You don't have a shelter, and this is something that I wanted to address here on this video. I'm almost done here today. But what's important is that Roswell, we need an overnight shelter. We need an overnight shelter where you don't have to become a resident. We need an overnight shelter that may not even be Christian, unfortunately, and it doesn't require a blood contract because there's just simply no place for people to go. And this is a true story. There was an individual. He was an unhoused, displaced person here in the city of Roswell, and he was like this for years. And he went to Albuquerque, and when he went to Albuquerque, I knew him and I ran into him, and he was having the time of his life. Why? Because first of all, he was a gay man, and it's kind of difficult to be a gay man here in Roswell, New Mexico. But in Albuquerque, like, nobody cares. The guy had a drug problem, and he had a hard time getting as many drugs as he wanted to for the price that he wanted to, but he went into Albuquerque, and he found that he could get everything that he wanted, and he went bananas. He was having the time of his life. He could stand on the street corner. He could do all the dope that he wanted. The police didn't give him any problems. He had to watch out for people bashing his head in, trying to rob him and rape him and do all the horrible things that they do in any metropolitan area, but it was a whole lot better than Roswell. So I do understand that people think that people are coming here, but at the same time, if I was in certain situations, it would seem to me like Albuquerque, there'd be better resources, there'd be a whole lot more opportunity for me to get into trouble or to get better in Albuquerque, because in Albuquerque you have tons of faith-based rehab centers, and you have a lot of rehab centers that are run by the state as well. So how are we going to get out of this problem? We have to love our way through this. That's what the Bible says. That's the biblical mandate. We have to love our way through this, and it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be quick. The fourth thing, as it concerns Roswell and the unhoused, is that the church is supposed to be involved with caring for the poor. Now, one of the things that we're doing here on this channel, hopefully, is we're trying to break down stigmas. Because as I thought about this, I fell into a trap that many people probably fall into. Certainly the homeless fall into this trap. The marginalized, the displaced, they fall into this trap. They say, there's nothing for me here. There's no resources for me here. The churches aren't doing anything for me here. But friend, that is not true. We have the Salvation Army. We have Harvest Ministries that feeds. We have Waymaker that offer food and resources. We have St. Andrew's Episcopal Church that offers food and resources. We have the homeless service, the homeless coalition. We have Westminster Presbyterian Church. They opened the first pop-up emergency shelter here in 2026 when the storm was here, and it was a fully functional shelter for 9 months. So the church is trying to make a difference here in the city of Roswell. Thank God for that. Praise the Lord for that. We have the community kitchen that gives out food every single day. You know, one thing that we have all kinds of things. So to say that there's nothing for the unhoused or the homeless here in the city of Roswell is absolutely not true. There may not be as much as we want, and the one thing that we're going to need is we're going to need people to go out this summer and to give out water, because it is hotter than hell out there on that concrete. And you know, and you may say, well, you know what, the church, you know, I attend Harvest Ministries or I attend Waymaker, so I'm doing my part. I'm putting money in the plate. You know, God is looking for more. God is looking for people's hearts. Thank God you tithe. Thank God you give your offering. You know, thank God for Waymaker, some of these wonderful churches, Presbyterian Church. But I'm asking you tonight, what are you doing to help this situation? Are you like the priest? Are you like the Levite? Or are you like the Good Samaritan? See, we read the story of the Good Samaritan and we stand up proudly and we say, oh, I'm the Good Samaritan. I'm helping. I give this amount of money. I do this and I do that. You know what? The church needs your money. Keep giving your money, whatever. But I'm asking you, what are you doing? Boots on the ground to make an impact in this situation that is so hard for us to solve. You know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel either. Go volunteer at one of these ministries. Help them out if you will, and God will bless you for it, because the church is called to do three things as I close. The church is called to worship the Lord Jesus Christ, to care for the poor, and to evangelize the lost. So if your church isn't doing anything to help with the unhoused, the displaced, or the marginalized here in the city of Roswell, then something is wrong with your worship. Get involved, get your hands dirty, and like I said, how do we solve this problem here with the unhoused in Roswell, New Mexico? There's only one way. We have to love our way through this. Thank you so much. Good night.